If you were around my channel about a year ago, then you know that I was working on an Android game for about 2 months. I've actually made 2 devlogs on that game. After both of those though, I never actually finalized the series by talking about how I submitted it and how the release actually went. This video is going to sum up the entirety of the game, especially because those of you who are new have no idea what I'm talking about right now. I started working on Particle Beam in May 2020. It was actually a challenge that both Yannick and Zyger did about a month before, where you created a game only using particle systems. If you don't know what those are, Unity has a basic game object built into the Unity editor that releases highly customizable particles, and you can do a lot with it, but it's also very limiting if it's all you can use to create a game. I thought that this was very interesting, so I started work on a game that I called Particle Beam. It's an abstract top-down twin-stick shooter where you move around a space and enemies slowly spawn around you, and the goal is basically to get the highest score. Where the game gets its name is the player has a very strong ability to shoot a giant laser beam. It's pretty overpowered, honestly, although you're not allowed to use it 100% of the time. It's only active for about 3 seconds, and it's only once a large progress bar at the top of your screen fills up. This progress bar will fill up slowly over time, or every time you defeat an enemy, it'll jump up a bit. To make development easier, it was actually just a PC game to begin with, but I didn't see much of an appeal to this sort of game in the PC market, so I actually later decided to release it on mobile, and more specifically Android. I'll get into that in a minute. In the 2 months of development that this game had, I created a character that you can move around with 2 on-screen joysticks, 4 different enemies that have different health and different attacks, and 2 different power-ups that you can get. There was also an unfinished feature that I still kept into the main game where a room would randomly spawn. It's very small, it's more like a shield that you can hide in if you have a large amount of enemies, but it would spawn far out of your range most of the time, so it's actually difficult to find them. Speaking of, the map is actually infinite. You can go as far in any direction as you want. I made it so that all enemies and all power-ups will spawn within a large circular range around you. That means I had to implement a system where there can't be too many things in that range. You don't want a giant swarm of enemies just slowly collecting over time if you stay in one area. Also, I ran into a performance problem where I would move very far, but enemies were left behind and they just kept following me even if I went extremely far, because there was no way for them to despawn. So I made it so that if they're out of your range for a given amount of time, then they'll despawn. I also worked a lot on the post-processing to make the game look a lot better than it actually does. Now, according to the challenge that Yannick and Zyger had, you could only use particles for everything in your game, which of course does not include music, and I actually used 2 songs from Streambeats that were very catchy and I thought fit the game very well. At first, I did have absolutely everything as a particle system, but as I kept testing it on mobile, performance kept on being an issue. For the player, the enemies, and the bullets, I made all of those particle systems that had larger particles and that wouldn't actually move barely anywhere, so it would just be the sprite's shape. Particle systems use up too much of your GPU, so on mobile it really slowed down the experience. I had to replace all the things that really didn't require particle systems with just plain sprites. So I technically did not follow the challenge, but by then I had already been working on the game for about a month, and the first devlog already had everything as a particle system, so I wasn't actually doing the challenge much anymore. I tried to make this game feel as juicy as possible. So like I said before, I had post-processing. I also tried to make sure that everything had some sort of particle system or was animated somehow. Even the score counter at the bottom of your screen does a small animation every time you get points. Final thing that I added into the game was actually an unlockable system. I placed this unlockable system on the menu that I had created before, which looks like this, and called it a shop. You can enter the shop and you can equip or you can buy new items. I was only ever able to finalize 2 different upgrades. Each one simply increases the fire rate, and they cost more depending on how much more powerful they are. Talking about cost, you don't use points in the shop, you actually use a new thing that I made called materials. These materials will randomly drop whenever you defeat an enemy. Now this also means that in an entire round, there's a chance that you won't get any materials at all. They're rare, although when they do drop, they drop about 5 or 6, and the harder the enemy that you defeat, the more likely it is for them to drop materials. Now that I'm done talking about the development, let's start on the release. In order to get your app onto a mobile market, you normally have to pay. In order to lower the amount of spam and bad apps, they require you to risk something, and what you're risking is the money that you pay them. If you want to get your app or game on the App Store, then that will cost you $100 a year. Now, when I looked at that, I noticed that that's a lot of money. I'm not going to pay that. So I obviously looked at other options, and also I have an Android phone. I don't have an iOS phone. I also thought about, okay, well, there's also the Google Play Store. That's also a very large market. So I researched how much that would cost, and that is a one-time fee of $20. And I was like, whoa, okay, so that is way cheaper, and I only have to pay it once, and then I can put a ton of apps on there. Like, I don't even need to do anything else, just keep putting my apps up. So I obviously went with the Google Play Store. If you want, you can go look up my game on the Play Store right now, download it and play it. It's up there right now. And verification went pretty easily with this, honestly. You pay, I think there's a small waiting period, and you also have to create the entire page for your app. You have to create the title, description, you have to add images, the icon for what would be in your home screen on your Android device, and your app or game also has to be reviewed by the people at Google so that they can give it a rating for what audiences it's intended for. Before putting my app on the Play Store, I was actually going to add advertisement. Although I tried creating ads with Unity's built-in ad creator, but it didn't actually work. I tried different projects, I tried different accounts, I tried everything, but Unity ads just wouldn't work. So sadly, I wasn't able to monetize my game. And it's not like I was going to sell it. I'm not going to ask anybody for money just to play a game. I'd obviously make everything optional, watching ads even. I wouldn't force anyone to watch ads. I'd make it so it's a quick revive or something like that. And so I obviously didn't earn any money from this project, but it was obviously still a super great experience and it was super fun. Thanks for watching this post-mortem of Particle Beam, my mobile game that I released over a year ago, but never talked about to anybody. I hope you enjoyed, and if you want to see more content like this, please hit the like button and tell me exactly what to do in the comments down below. Please subscribe if you want to keep seeing more of my stuff, and I'll see you in the next video.